I didn't expect to see her that morning. The cafe was the kind of place that rarely changed. Two bright bulbs above the counter. The same three chalkboard specials no one ordered. The hum of the refrigerator filling in the spaces where conversation failed. I came because it was quiet, and because it was open when I couldn't sleep. She was already there, sitting at the corner table, a paperback face down beside her mug. She always left it face down, like she didn't want anyone to see what she was reading. I never asked. I only knew her as my neighbor, the woman from across the hall, a little older, with that careful way of moving that made it look like she was always holding something back. When I stepped up to the counter, the barista barely looked up. "Medium drip, no room?" she asked. I nodded, but before I could answer, I heard her voice from the corner. "He takes it black. No lid." It wasn't loud, but it cut through. My ears warmed before I even turned. She was smiling down at her book, like she hadn't just said it. The barista glanced between us, half shrugged, and handed me the cup. "Thanks," I said, not sure who I was talking to. She didn't look up right away, just pressed her finger into the page to keep her place. "You always order the same thing. Easy to remember." I wanted to ask how often she noticed. Instead, I sat 2 tables away, close enough to hear her cup touch down on the saucer. I told myself not to stare, but I kept catching pieces, the way she folded the napkin in half, then in half again, until it was a narrow strip she smoothed against the table. The faint smudge of ink on her thumb from the book's pages. When she finally looked up, our eyes met for a second too long. Long enough that I had to drop mine. She let it go with a small laugh. Dry, but not unkind. "You're quiet, you know that?" "Yeah," I said, wrapping both hands around the coffee though it was too hot to drink. "I get that a lot." "You don't seem quiet in the mornings," she said. "I hear your music through the wall sometimes." "Old stuff." That startled me. I didn't realize the sound carried. "Sorry," I muttered. "Don't be." She tilted her head, studying me like she was piecing together something she hadn't expected. "It's nice." After that, the silence grew heavier. Not awkward, but charged, like there was something else we should have said and didn't. She stood to leave first, slipping the folded napkin into her book as a makeshift bookmark. On her way out, she brushed her fingertips lightly against my table, not my hand, not even the cup, just the wood, as if to say she had noticed me there, and that was enough. I watched her walk past the rain-streaked windows, umbrellas snapping open in the wind. For a long time, I stayed with my untouched coffee, scrolling through my phone, typing out a message I never sent. "Good seeing you. Do you come here every morning?" All of them backspaced into nothing. I thought that would be the end of it. A small moment, filed away with all the other quiet mornings. But when I got back upstairs that evening, there was a slip of paper on my doormat. No name, no explanation. Just her handwriting. "If you're awake later, knock." I stood in the hall longer than I should have, her note still folded in my hand. A scrap of paper shouldn't feel heavier than my keys, but it did. When I finally knocked, it was soft, the kind of knock you give when you half hope they won't hear. The door opened almost immediately. She was barefoot, cardigan wrapped around her shoulders, hair tucked behind one ear like she'd been waiting. "Come in," she said, quiet, almost casual. Her apartment looked like mine, only lived in. Plants angled toward the light. A mug left on the coffee table. A sweater draped over the back of the couch. I caught myself cataloging all the little signs of her life, as though they explained something about her I hadn't known before. She poured tea without asking. 1 cup for her, 1 for me. The steam curled between us as we sat opposite each other. "I don't usually." I started, then stopped. Her eyes flicked to mine, steady. "Me neither." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was deliberate, as if both of us were measuring how far we'd let this go. She broke it first. "I used to come here every night after the divorce. Same tea, same chair. It was easier than trying to sleep." Her hand lingered on the rim of the cup. I noticed the faint line where her wedding ring must have been, skin just a shade lighter. She didn't hide it, but she didn't draw attention to it either. I nodded. not sure what to say. Divorce was one of those words that carried its own weather, and I wasn't old enough to know what to do with it. I thought it was over then, she said softly, more to the steam than to me. Everything. The part of life that feels alive. Something in my chest tightened. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but the words felt too heavy in my throat. Instead, I traced the handle of my cup with my thumb, stalling. You're not that old, I managed. Lame. Immediately regretted it. She smiled faintly, not offended. Old enough to know better. That line stayed with me. It carried both warning and invitation. I thought about the risks. Her age, my age, the fact that she lived just across the hall. Too close. Too easy to be seen. But when her knee brushed mine under the table, barely, almost accidental, I didn't move away. We sat like that, quiet, letting the sound of the radiator fill the room. At some point, she laughed. Soft, unexpected. You look like you're trying to solve a math problem you don't want anyone to see. She was right. I was doing equations in my head. The difference between us, the cost of letting this mean something, the weight of her gaze against the simple fact of my own loneliness. I didn't answer, just looked at her, held it longer than I should have. And when she reached across the table to adjust my cup, sliding it closer, though it was already within reach, it felt like more than it was. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next morning, I tried to avoid the cafe. I told myself it would be better. That too much, too soon would only ruin what little ground we had. But by late afternoon, I found myself outside her door again. No note this time. No reason to knock. I told myself I was just passing by. The door opened before I moved. She was standing there, phone in hand, like she'd been about to leave. Oh, she said, blinking. Hi. Sorry, I stammered, stepping back. I was just, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It's fine. She slipped the phone into her pocket. I was heading out anyway. Something in her tone made me pause. Guarded, like a curtain pulled halfway shut. We walked down the stairs together, side by side. Too close not to notice the brush of her sleeve against mine. Too far to call it intentional. At the bottom, we nearly collided with someone. My friend Daniel, bag of groceries in hand. He glanced between us. Hey, didn't know you two knew each other. Neighbors, she said quickly. Smooth. Practiced. I nodded, but my throat was tight. Daniel grinned. Lucky. She makes the best banana bread. He winked at her, oblivious, then moved on. I caught the faintest flush in her cheeks, though it was gone as fast as it came. When we stepped outside, the air felt heavier. Neither of us spoke until we reached the corner. She slowed, shifting her bag higher on her shoulder. You should be careful, she said finally. Careful. She looked at me then, sharp and tired all at once. People notice things, even when you think they don't. I wanted to say I didn't care, that noticing wasn't the same as knowing. But the words stalled. Instead, I asked, do you? Her mouth opened, closed. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. It's different for me. We stood there, caught between what was safe to say and what was pressing at the edges of silence. A car horn blared down the street, snapping the moment. She took a step back, toward her door. I should go. I should have let her. Should have nodded and walked away. But my hand lifted, almost on its own, touching her wrist. Just lightly, enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Not right away. Her eyes flicked to my hand, then back to my face. The pause between us thickened, waited, like the second before rain. And then she exhaled, slow, deliberate, and slipped her hand free. Not yet, she whispered. The space she left behind burned. I watched her retreat, every step deliberate, and felt the unfinished words crowding my mouth. We had been one breath away, and still, somehow, it was too far. It was late when I saw her again. She was sitting on the bench outside our building, coat pulled tight, a thermos balanced between her hands. The streetlight above flickered, giving the whole moment a stuttered, half-dream look. I almost walked past, but her head lifted at the sound of my steps, and there was no undoing it. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Not really. She patted the bench beside her. Join the club. I sat, leaving just enough space to be polite. She poured from the thermos into the cap and offered it. The tea was lukewarm, faintly bitter. We didn't talk at first. Just listened to the city breathing around us. Cars rolling by, a dog barking somewhere down the block, the faint rustle of leaves. Then she said, almost idly, I saw you with that girl yesterday. I blinked. What girl? At the cafe. The one with the bright scarf. She didn't look at me, just twisted the thermos cap in her hands. She's just a friend, I said too quickly. Her mouth curved. Not quite a smile. More like she'd caught herself in a thought she didn't want me to see. Doesn't matter. But it did. The way she said it made my chest tighten. I let the silence sit. Then, it matters to me. That was too much, maybe. Her shoulders stiffened, and for a second I thought she'd stand, leave, retreat behind the walls she built so carefully. Instead, she laughed once, low, almost bitter. You're 22. You don't know what matters yet. The words stung, but not because they were untrue. Because I could hear the crack in her voice. I set the empty cap down on the bench between us. Then tell me. She looked at me finally, eyes searching. Tell you what? What matters? The pause stretched long. She held my gaze, and in that stare I saw something raw, something she hadn't meant to let slip. I told myself it was over, she said quietly. That part of me. The part that wants more. She pressed her lips together, shook her head like she regretted saying it already. It's easier that way. Her hands tightened around the thermos. I wanted to take it from her, wanted to take the weight of it all. But I didn't move. I just whispered, and now. The air between us was thin, fragile. Her eyes flicked down, then up again, as though balancing on the edge of something she couldn't name. Now, she said, voice barely audible, I don't know what I'm doing. Her hand shifted closer on the bench, not touching, but close enough that the space buzzed like a live wire. And then the question hung there, unspoken but deafening. Are we going to do this? For 2 nights, her bench sat empty. The first time, I told myself she was tired. The second, I stood by my window longer than I should have, lights off, waiting for a shadow that didn't appear. By the third night, I gave up and went to the cafe alone. The barista knew me well enough by now not to ask. She slid the cup across, and I carried it to the corner where she usually sat. The paperback wasn't there. The folded napkin wasn't there. Just me and the humming refrigerator. I almost texted. My thumb hovered over her name, the unsent words forming and erasing in loops. You okay? Too direct. Haven't seen you around. Too obvious. Tea tonight? Too much. I pocketed my phone instead. The next morning, I finally saw her. In the lobby, keys jangling in one hand, a grocery bag in the other. She startled when the elevator doors slid open and found me there. Oh, she said. Her smile looked rehearsed. Hey. Hey. The doors closed, trapping us in that small metal box. The hum of the elevator filled the silence. She shifted the bag higher. I've been busy. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. You could have. I started, then stopped. The words caught in my throat. She rescued me by speaking over them. My daughter's back in town. Just for a few weeks. I've been, well, distracted. I nodded, though the word daughter struck deeper than I expected. I hadn't pictured her as someone's mother, though of course she was. Mid-40s, divorce, the ring-shaped shadow on her finger. I'd known, but I hadn't let myself imagine it. Something inside me tightened. The math I'd been doing in my head suddenly looked different on the page. The elevator chimed. She stepped out quickly, almost too quickly, and turned down the hall without looking back. I stayed behind, watching the doors close again, as if they could explain what I was supposed to do now. That night, her light was on. I stood outside her door, hand raised, almost knocking. Almost. But then I saw it. 2 sets of shoes by her doormat. Her daughter's, probably. Or maybe not. I couldn't know. I lowered my hand. Went back to my apartment. Sat on the edge of the bed with the phone glowing in my palm. I typed, I miss our talks. Stared at it until the letters blurred. Then I erased it, left the screen empty. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day, gray sky, drizzle on the windows, the kind of weather that makes you restless without knowing why. I was unlocking my door when hers opened across the hall. She stepped out, then froze when she saw me. We hadn't spoken properly since the elevator. Just passing nods, polite smiles that felt borrowed. "Hi," she said, too soft, like she wasn't sure if she had the right. "Hi." For a second, neither of us moved. Then she sighed, shook her head like she'd made a decision, and gestured inside. "Come in. Just for a minute." Her apartment was quieter than before. No plants lit by the window this time, no mug on the table. Everything tidied away, like she'd been trying to erase herself. She leaned against the counter while I stood there, uncertain. "My daughter left this morning," she said. "Early flight. The place feels empty again." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She looked at me then, really looked, like she'd been avoiding it. I shouldn't have pulled back. I don't know what I'm doing." Her honesty cracked something in me. All the unsent messages, all the almost knocks, all the half-thoughts I'd swallowed, they rose up at once. "You don't have to know," I said quietly. "I don't either." She closed her eyes, breathed out through her nose. "You're too young for this." "Maybe." I swallowed. "But I'm here." That landed. I saw it in the way her shoulders sagged, like she'd been holding weight she couldn't set down until now. Silence filled the kitchen, thicker than any words. "Finally," she said, "I keep telling myself it's wrong." And her eyes flicked to mine, sharp and vulnerable at once. "And I don't believe it when you're standing here." The air between us hummed. I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't. Not yet. I let the moment stay what it was. Unfinished, fragile. She crossed the small space instead. Not quickly, not with any grand gesture. Just one careful step at a time until she was close enough to touch. Her hand hovered, then landed lightly on my forearm. Not a grab, not a claim. Just contact. Human. We stood there, still as the rain outside. Her fingers barely curled against my sleeve. I didn't speak. Neither did she. And then, the faintest smile broke across her face, tired but real. "Okay," she whispered. That was all. But it was enough. The weeks that followed didn't look different from the outside. I still bought the same coffee at the same cafe. She still folded napkins into neat strips, still left her paperback face down on the table. But something shifted. It was in the way she let me walk her home without excuses. The way she knocked on my door once, late at night, not with a note this time, but with 2 mugs of tea balanced carefully in her hands. We didn't talk about what we were. No labels, no declarations. It was enough to share a bench on a cold evening. Her thermos passed back and forth between us, her knee resting against mine without either of us moving away. Some mornings, I'd catch her glancing at the clock. Always 8:47 a.m., the minute I usually came down for coffee. And some mornings, I'd find her already waiting by the counter, her order lined up beside mine, as if she'd known. Life didn't suddenly become easier. She still had her past. I still had my uncertainty. Some nights she went quiet, and I learned not to press. Some days I disappeared into myself, and she let me. But in the small things, there was steadiness. Her cardigan draped across my chair. My music low through the wall, no longer turned down out of fear she'd hear. The silence between us, once heavy, now familiar. One evening, sitting on the same bench where she first told me she didn't know what she was doing, she leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. We didn't move for a long time. The city breathed around us. Cars, footsteps, the hum of the streetlight overhead. "I thought it was over," she said at last, her voice almost lost in the air. I turned slightly, enough to catch the faint smile tugging at her mouth. "It's just getting started," I murmured back. She laughed once, soft and genuine, and let the sound fade into the quiet. We stayed like that until the night cooled, until the tea in the thermos was gone, until there was nothing left to say. And somehow that was enough. Because when she reached over, threading her fingers through mine. No hesitation, no retreat. I understood something we hadn't put into words. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't certain. But it was ours. And in the quiet, that felt like everything. What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?